Kia ora koutou. Hello everyone and welcome to Progress and Practice by Go Well Consulting, the series where we profile the initiatives being brought to market by the businesses we work with. I'm Nick Morrison and this is the show where good ideas meet real world action. Today we're talking about one of the most controversial objects in the New Zealand landscape, the humble road cone. They've become a bit of a national obsession for Aotearoa. Media regularly draw attention to the numbers of them on our roads. Talkback radio hosts and their listeners regularly bemoan their use, and even some politicians boast they are the ones who can fix the apparent problem. But like them or loathe them, they are here to stay. They play a vital role in protecting road workers and the public during inevitable road maintenance and infrastructure projects. But when they're damaged, forgotten or worn out, where do they go? Till very recently in New Zealand, the answer was straightforward and wasteful. Either polluted our environment or went to landfill. Then road safety equipment company RTL decided to change that. Their program, Better Cone, is the first of its kind in Aotearoa, a dedicated recycling initiative for road cones that has already diverted an impressive 1,500 cones from landfill in just a few short months. It's the kind of initiative that makes you wonder why it took so long and admire the people who finally made it happen. In this conversation, you're about to hear Joanne McMahon, the General Manager of RTL, share how Better Cone came together, the challenges of building something with no local blueprint to follow, the many learnings they had on the way, and what she hopes it signals for the wider industry. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Joanne. Great to see you.
You too, Nick.
Tell me, where are you coming to us from today?
Beautiful Penrose in Auckland.
Oh, brilliant. So you're in the HQ, RTL head office.
Am indeed, yes.
Your second home.
Feels like that sometimes.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today about your progress and practice. Please tell us about the initiative that we're going to be discussing today.
Okay, so broadly speaking, it is a road cone recycling manufacturing initiative. So full circular economy on the dreaded road cone.
Amazing. And I love that you have called it the dreaded road cone yourself. It must trigger, I think, a lot of people's ears hearing that road cone and then also recycling as well. So tell us more. What's involved? What are you doing with these road cones?
So basically, we can take any cone from any manufacturer that's out in the market, and we recycle them into chip, and then that chip goes into the base of a new road cone. So all of the material is reused in the process, including the production offcuts. Nothing goes to landfill. So it's a fully closed loop system, and it's nationwide.
Incredible. Okay, and so how are the cones getting to you? Where are the cones coming from? Are you out picking them up off the street, or are they being sent to you?
So right now, the majority of our temporary traffic management customers have lots of road cones in their yards. And they've been waiting for something like this, I guess, to be offered to them. And if they're in Auckland, they will return them to our sister company, Proline.
Yeah.
If not, we have partnered with a freight company called Linfox for excellent freight rates to return cones from all around the country. And the customer just has to palletize them, maximum 200 on a pallet, and then they come up and get shredded. And we operate a 2-for-1 system. So send 2 cones back, buy 1 new one.
Buy one.
Yeah.
I like it. We're going to come back to some more of that detail. I've got some questions around that, but I just want to touch on this one because you've already mentioned a couple of key stakeholders. Can you tell me about the stakeholders who have been involved? So obviously RTL and your team internally have been working on this for quite some time.
Yeah.
You mentioned Proline, who's one of your sister companies, and so they are doing the physical shredding and remanufacturing of the cones.
Yes, they are. So Proline is our sister company. They're a molding company, and we are a distributor of the cone. So there's ourselves, Proline, and then also our Traffic board of directors, who have invested in all of the machinery. So there's three key stakeholders in this.
And then also you mentioned the courier company. Are they relatively new to jump on board?
Yes, they are. Yes, we just managed to get them on board a few months ago, and they've got 20 different locations that cones can be dropped off to. So it's a really good system.
Fantastic, and very collaborative. I guess there is that advantage for you having that sister company, but I know that doesn't mean the collaboration is any easier, right? Because they've got their business, I guess, priorities as well. So I guess could you talk to that collaboration piece and what that's been like, and the trials and tribulations of getting everyone on board this journey?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Proline came on board as the cone manufacturer, and they also had a couple of recyclers in Auckland that they used, but it wasn't what we wanted in terms of a closed loop process. We wanted to be able to control it from the cones coming back on site so that they would then chip them themselves and manufacture them. But there's a lot that goes into the regulatory compliance of a road cone. So we had to do a lot of testing, or not us, but Proline, in terms of the color, the material, just how much recycled material they could use without the cone being non-compliant.
Yes.
So it was a lot of trial and error, and hats off to them. They really did stick with it.
And what was the sort of timeline for that, Joanne? Like, what actually, I'll get you to answer that question for the whole project. So from first idea through to finally taking the recycled cone to market, what was that timeline and can you give me a sense of where the longest sort of periods were? For example, was the testing a big part of that, or was it getting the equipment? Tell us a bit about the journey and the timelines involved.
So I reckon probably all up, it was maybe a 2.5-year project. From the sign off that this was something we all wanted to be involved in, to then getting the equipment over here. And then it wasn't just a case of getting the tooling, but we then wanted to have robotics involved as well. Yes. And then making that all work. That was probably a good 4 months setup. Then the actual manufacturing of the cones, the failure rates, getting the failure rate down. All of that was probably the longest part, to be fair. I would say that was a good 6 months. And then finally the last piece was investing in the recycling gear so that it could all be done in the same plant.
And what was that journey like having been working with RTL now for 3 or so years, I think it is. I mean, I'm very well aware that it's been a roller coaster, but can you share for those watching and listening around how that's been, I guess, emotionally, like thinking you're going to do this and then you think you've got a solution and no, finding out the testing didn't work and so on and so forth. What's it been like, the experience for you?
Look, I think that for me and some of the key team involved, it has required a lot of patience. This isn't something we wanted to launch to market and for it then to fail. So we wanted to be very sure that we had consistency of manufacture, that we were able to get enough cones back for recycling, and that the market was on board with the idea. And we had a lot of false starts, I would say. We thought we were going to launch, in one particular month. It took us 6 months after that to launch. And also the comms around that, both internally and externally. People did start to lose hope, but Yeah, I mean, myself, Cameron, who runs Proline, and obviously our owner, Reno, we knew what had to be done, and we weren't giving up.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a credit, I think, because as I say, I've been on that journey with you, and I've been one of those stakeholders, nervously awaiting the next update.
Yeah.
So it's really worth, I think, commending you and the team for hanging in there. And I think it's worth mentioning, Joanne, during a pretty challenging time, like the economic situation in New Zealand has been really tough, and I know that RTL have not been protected from that. And so the fact that you kept on going through these challenging times, and touch wood, we're kind of on the way out. Can you touch on that for us in terms of how that was in that context? Like, did it add extra stress and workload on the team, or did it provide some inspiration and something else to kind of put their attention to? Can you tell us a bit about the relationship there?
I would have to say it was more of the former and less of the latter, to be totally honest, because the industry essentially fell off a cliff in September, October 2024. And then, as a company, we had to adapt to that. And so trying to maintain enthusiasm for a cone recycling program when there really wasn't much demand for cones. Also, the regulatory framework that the industry worked under for a very long time had changed. And then we had an awful lot of media resistance to the cone, and so it was very difficult to keep that momentum of we've got to do this, we're in this now, and we've got to see it through. But as the first cones started to be manufactured, then the team certainly were behind it all the way.
So that was quite a key milestone for motivation and morale.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And the fact that it gave us something that nobody else was doing in the market. It was definitely a key differentiator for us.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we are so excited about it and have so much respect for you and the team for doing, is that this is a leadership position. No one else has done this before. You're not following anyone else. There's no one else to kind of look to and knock on their door and ask how they did it. This is the first cone recycling program in New Zealand, right?
Yes, it is. It is. And we are the only cone manufacturers in New Zealand as well. So the whole thing is brand new. Everybody else imports their cones from China, Taiwan, etc. So very new.
Well, this is such a big part of fixing the road cone dilemma, I guess, because all those who complain about the road cones out there and where they go, well, in theory, we shouldn't have to really import too many more, right? Because there's plenty enough around the country. I know it's not that simple, but in theory, that should happen. We see that importing drop, and so therefore, and the waste going to landfill drop, and therefore we get the circular flow of cones going round and round. Can I just ask a question around that? Are there restrictions, for want of a better word, that around what you can take back? Are there certain cones that are too damaged or whatever that you can't recycle, or you can take anything?
Yeah, no, we can't take just anything, but we can take cones that a lot of people would think there's no way that's going to go through a shredder. You'd be amazed what a shredder can do. So cones that are absolutely covered in bitumen, we can't take. Any stones, nails, anything metal that's in there either has to be removed or we cannot put it through the machine. But 9 times out of 10, people are pretty good. They understand what can and cannot be done. And they generally are pretty good at checking before they send them back up.
Right. And is that much of a workload for you guys in terms of checking that quality check before you throw things in the shredder?
It's an eyeball exercise now. The guys are pretty used to what needs to be done. So they're onto it.
We were talking a bit about motivation earlier, and I want to ask you, what was the main motivation for this? Was it about saving the cones problem, or was it about bringing something new to market? Was it the commercial side of it? What I imagine it was a bit of a mix of all of those things, but what motivated you and the team to pull this together?
Yeah, look, I think that the commercial aspect is absolutely critical, and Proline as the manufacturer, us as the distributor, we could see that there was growth, market share to have there, so that's certainly part of it. But we were also very clear from the get-go that if we were going to do this, we were going to do it right. We weren't going to be taking any shortcuts, or doing it partially, but then maybe not completing the process. We just thought, no, we're doing this the whole hog. So the whole choice of machinery, the process, the lack of, I guess, wanting to cut corners. I mean, that's really what we concentrated on, and we wanted to lead the industry. We didn't want to follow it. So yeah. And I think that's really now the key differentiator. We've seen a lot of stuff go out in the media, oh, we recycle cones, and we kind of read it, go, you're not, you're not doing it,
Right. So there's others making claims,
yeah.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure now. We've all spent a lot of time going around the major customers nationwide, and I think it's pretty clear that we're the only ones who are doing this properly, and they're now jumping on board, which is great.
So I was going to ask that question. So tell me a bit about the positives for the business and how the market has responded.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've had customers who we haven't dealt with in maybe 5-6 years now coming back to us. So
wow.
that is how important this has been to us, and it helps them, particularly for their own sustainability points, when they're going for contracts, that they can say, look, we're recycling all of our cones, etc., etc. So it's a major, and it's a shift now in the industry, and I can see that people are now probably over the next year or so going to say, well, if you don't recycle cones, we're not going with you, because they know it's available. So there's no reason not to do it.
So to that point, do you foresee other cone providers doing it as well? Is it probably a no-brainer that they catch up?
Yeah, I mean, they probably will. But at the end of the day, like I said earlier, we wanted to lead it. So that's what we've done, and we're happy in that position.
Yeah, great. And knowing it's going to take them a few years to kind of catch up and work out how to do it themselves.
It's not an easy process.
Yeah, right. We've talked a bit about obstacles and some of the challenges along the way, but can you tell me what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced? Some specifics around obstacles that you had to overcome?
Definitely the technical challenges. It really was all about that consistency in manufacturing quality and compliance. That was the key thing. But also, I guess, getting the narrative right, that was the RTL part of things, was bringing the product to market, and people, wanting to know what was the percentage of recycled material. Which again is difficult when you're starting out, because it's going to change, dependent upon how the manufacturing process changes. So we had to really, I guess, take a look at the narrative and realize that our part in this was stopping the cones going into landfill. That's what the key thing was. And then the last, I guess, roadblock was definitely trying to get the cones back nationwide, because you know, when we first started, it was $1.50 to $2 to get a cone back, each cone, and customers just they're not going to spend that money, you know.
Right.
So, despite liking the whole sustainability initiative, they weren't going to do it at a significant cost to themselves. So
Right.
we had to come up with a plan, which is where Linfox have now come in.
Yeah. On the topic of price, can you tell us how do these cones compare to others that you provide, but also on the market? Like, is it considerably greater cost, about the same, cheaper?
No, we knew again that there was no point in putting something out in the market that was going to be more expensive, because people won't pay it. They you know they won't.
Yeah.
They see the cone as a commodity product, something that they have to have. They're not going to pay any more than they absolutely have to. So no, our cone is highly competitive. We still have the lion's share of the market, and we launched it at the same rate as we were selling the previous cones.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I know that's the truth, but a part of me dies inside knowing, you know, that people aren't willing to spend a little bit more for the right reasons. And, you know, you talked about their own sustainability goals and stuff before, and that this is helping with them. But, you know, it's also a hard truth that they're not willing to pay that extra amount to achieve those. So I guess that speaks to I guess smarts and wisdom that you guys had, that you knew that, and you didn't try and pitch this as something that was just all about the sustainability aspect and it came with a higher price, and also that I don't know, there's the dedication to still bring it together. Is that kind of making sense? Is that how it was from the start? Like you knew that had to be price competitive?
We knew it had to be. Yeah, we knew it had to be price competitive. Absolutely, we knew, and we knew that we had to put across to the customer that, you know, we're not a cone recycler. That's not our core business. That's not where we make our money. You know, and we have to be profitable as a supplier. So, so that's where the 2-for-1 initiative came from, and pretty much everybody was okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't much resistance.
Yeah, and so just to expand on that a bit, so the cones, is price-wise, they match non-recycled ones, but the way to make it work for you guys was that, they return one cone and buy two. Is that right? Or the other way around?
No, it's the other way around. Other way around.
Right.
So they return 100 cones, they have to buy 50.
50.
Yeah.
Got
so
you.
that's
And that's been well received.
Well received. No issues with that at all.
I think that's a really great insight for others who are thinking about sort of take back recycling sort of programs where customers are willing to help out a little bit. So the price is about the same, but this commitment of buying your 2-for-1, you know, shows that they are willing to kind of help out in a way. You know, they want the solution as well.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we were always very aware that it had to be competitive, and particularly at the time that we started doing this, because the industry was in a major slump. So, you know, there wasn't a lot of cash floating around to do this. So, yeah.
Joanne, we've got some pictures here that you've shared with us, and I'm just going to share screen and bring up, and I want you just to talk us through what we're looking at. So just bear with me as I click the share screen button and bring it up onto full screen. So can you tell us what we are looking at here?
Okay, so on the left, I believe that is the sustainability team from HEB, who are one of the top tier contractors. And they came on site to have a look at the whole process. And Cameron, who is at the kind of back centre, he is the Proline GM, and he is taking them through what's happening. You'll see all of those cones there. Now that's interesting, because those cones came from an AT initiative that our other sister company Directions got involved with, and they were contracted by AT to pick up all of the old cones, old road signs, etc., that had been left along the network. And so you can see how many cones came back. It was
so
quite,
these are just left
incredible.
out
Yep.
there that
Yep.
no contractors taking claim to anymore. They're just free
Yep.
out there in the environment. Wow.
They're basically out there, and then the contractors have been contacted because they have their brand name on the cone, and they're contacted, and they have 2 weeks to collect them. Otherwise,
Right.
they're shredded. Yeah.
Right. And so looking at this picture, you can see various different, I guess, conditions of the cones. So some look almost new and some look very old and dark. And is that the bitumen that's sort of that darker color on them? And is that
Yes.
and all those cones acceptable? Or
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that a good 90% of those cones are acceptable. And yeah, it is the bitumen that you can see, and you'll see that some cones go darker in color, as in dark red, and others just fade away into that kind of light orange. They're all non-compliant. There is a band that the cone color has to meet. So yeah.
Great. And so who's this very enthusiastic individual with her thumbs up on the right?
So that's Tale Lawrence. So she's one of our territory managers, and she was I think part of the HEB group there. But yeah, that was just one of my team members, and they were so excited to see all of this coming together. And also when you bring a big contractor like HEB onto site, and they're so impressed. I mean, that really does make it all worthwhile.
Yeah, tell me about that impact on the team. Like, we've talked a bit about the challenging times that RTL and everyone in New Zealand's been through, really. But tell me, how's that sort of impact on morale and team culture been now that you're having, the likes of these contractors and others coming in, and sustainability teams coming in and seeing it?
Yeah, look, I mean, it really has given a big boost to morale, because human nature being what it is, when things aren't going too well, people can get very I guess insular, rather than kind of looking to the future. They're just dealing with the day to day and trying to get through. So to have this initiative and see how everybody that we brought on site, just to see how excited they were at what we were doing, it gave the team a huge boost. Yeah.
So good. That's so good. I really want that, I guess, that message to get out, is that that the not unintended, but I guess the indirect impacts from initiatives like this that they have, and kind of quite hard to measure, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But they're so important, right? They're such a huge factor. Those kind of intangible impacts, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, what have we got here? Looks like some shredding going on.
Some shredding going on, absolutely. So these are on the left, these are broken bits of cones. And then on the right, that's what happens once it goes through the chipper. So basically you've got all this shredded material, and then that goes into the base of the cone.
Right. So what? There's sort of two phases. So there's initial shredding down, and then there's the chipping.
Yeah. So it's sorry. So they just happen to be broken bits of cone on the left.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So that the machine basically chips all of the cones into what looks like on the right there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. These have just been extracted from out of the machine, or?
Yeah.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you can see that. Well, yeah, I can see there's the predominantly orange chips here, and then the black bits in there as well. That's not a problem that you've got.
No, because it's only going into the base, so you can't actually see it in the cone itself. It's just underneath the cone.
Okay, I think we've got a picture of the base here. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, yes. So this is the bases on the top left here.
Yes, that's right. Okay. So that's the bases coming through, and you can see we've got our mascot there on the left.
Yes, the toy lion. Love it.
Our production supervisor. And what we found, particularly in some of the temperatures that we've been getting, we found that the bases when they were coming out, they were very hot, and so there was the potential of them not fitting correctly into the jig before they go into the next part of manufacture. So we had to cool them down,
Right.
and that's why you see this very Kiwi ingenuity solution of the fans as they're coming out. That's obviously something that we just had to come up with on the fly, you know.
Yeah, and I think that speaks volumes, Joanne, to the attitude that you guys have taken to this. That you know, okay, found a problem that needed solving through the process here. How are we going to do it? I don't think this will be permanent, right? Does it look like this is long-term kind of solution? But you've found a way to solve it, at least in the short to mid-term. And I think that just speaks volumes to the commitment and resilience that you've had to keep on going. And it was that a bit what it was like. So you had the big vision of what you wanted, but there was little problem that needed solving after little problem that needed solving along the way.
Yes. Yeah, many little problems. So thankfully, Cam there on the left, across from me with the cones coming out, he's a patient man, so he had to deal with all the little problems.
And so that image between you and Cam, that's the final cone. So the base is where the recycled pieces that have been chipped up and remolded go into that, and then a new cone, virgin material for the cone.
That's right.
On top. Okay, and then it's some kind of, is there something that goes over top of it all, like encases it all, like because it's the same color all the way over, or is that just the photo?
So if you can imagine, the base is in underneath what you're saying,
Right.
and so then it's over molded the cone onto the base, and then banded, and then fusion printed, as you can see on the logos there on the third picture. And then off it goes to the customer.
Great. And you have sort of touched on this a little bit throughout our conversation already, but there's pretty strict requirements around this cone. So the color of the orange, the silver bands, they all have to meet the regulatory standards.
They do. Right. They must. There's a band within which the color of the cone must be, and then you've got the reflective colors, and they also have to pass testing before it can be accepted. Yeah.
And so they have to pass the regulatory standards to be sold to the market, and then also once they're out and in use, they have to keep being meet the regulatory standards. So after a while, they start to fade, start to get dirty.
That's right.
And okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you for those images. It's just great to see it kind of all coming together in the process that's involved. I really want to ask you now about the impacts of it. Have you got any information for us around the impacts so far? How many cones you've diverted from landfill or anything along those lines?
We've now got our intranet all set up, so we're automatically saving all of this material, all the data, should I say, which is great. So I checked on this the other day, and since July last year, we've diverted just over 1,500 cones from landfill. But to give you an idea of how much this has ramped up this year, 620 of those were returned in February alone.
Wow!
So that's what we're seeing now is a big
over
uptick.
A third.
Yeah,
well, that's sort of a bit over 40% or so, doing my maths on the fly in 1 month. Okay, so it's really starting to catch on.
Yeah, it is. So that's, but that alone, that 1,500 and odd 11 cones, that's like 7 ton of polyethylene reprocessed into the product, which is excellent.
So that's 7 tons, 7,000 kgs. To dramatize it a bit more, but that's not new fossil fuels coming out of the ground. It's not new plastic being put into the environment.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, that's only going to go up, right? And I just... that for me as a sustainability professional here, and I know you do too as well, Joanne, but get pretty excited about this kind of stuff because we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. That's fundamental in terms of climate change, and we know the issues with plastic pollution as well. And here is a solution. We still need road cones. We still need that road safety stuff. So this is kind of the solution, right? Using the resources that are already in market, already been extracted. Let's turn the tap off on new fossil fuels and use what's already available. We've already got.
Yep. Absolutely.
What would you do differently if you had your time again?
I think we would allow much more time and budget than we initially thought.
Yeah.
I think we were right to just kind of soft launch, because if we had done a big, hard launch, we may have come a cropper quite early on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than that, I just think you just have to be very patient and persistent, and I guess, one thing that I would say is when you start this process or this journey, I guess, you think you're going to end up in one place. That's not necessarily where you end up, but it is the journey and getting there and the refining of the processes and all of that. And that, at the end of the day, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, so really having that open mind, having that vision and having the values around it, but having that open mind of what the final outcome is, or the final product is. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And what does the future of the Better Cone program look like? Well, how do you see it playing out over the coming months and years?
Well, we're definitely seeing demand accelerating now. And we are seeing now economically in New Zealand, there's more investment in infrastructure. So we would, we're very optimistic that this is going to become something that is an industry norm, really.
Yeah.
That's what we want. That's why we started this. We don't want it to be a niche initiative. We want it to become an industry norm. Yeah.
And have you received any Better Cones back yet? Probably too soon, I imagine. Too soon. But that'll be a bit of a milestone, right? When you see a recycled cone coming back to be re-recycled.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be.
And do you see any opportunities for the rest of the cone, because we've talked a bit about the regulatory requirements around the color, etc. Do you think that that's possible in the future or not, or does something need to change for that to be possible?
No, I think that the color and the reflectivity of the bands, etc. I can't see that changing anytime soon, and nor should it, because like it or loathe it, the cone is here to stay. It is an excellent product for delineating a road, coming up to a roadwork site, and it's about the safety of the workers on that site at the end of the day.
And the people using the road too, right?
Yeah.
We're getting some roadworks getting done around. I'm a very enthusiastic cyclist, so very happy to see some cycle lanes going on around me, and they play such an important role of keeping the pedestrians and the cyclists safe while the infrastructure is being put in place. Well, fantastic, Joanne. Thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic to learn a bit more about your progress and practice, the Better Cone. And I've sort of said already, but I'll repeat it again. Just so much respect and I think credit must go to you and the team for hanging in there. As I say, we've been on this journey a bit with you, and I know it's been tough, but really excited for you starting to see the rewards come, and just so thankful that you have led this and that the team have led this alongside you, because geez, we need these solutions coming to market. And if people don't show that resilience and determination that you guys have shown, then we're just going to be stuck in the same old economic system, right? And using up resources and throwing them into landfill. And so thank you to you and your team for getting to this point.
Well, thanks, Nick, and thank you for all of your support along the way. You were a big part of this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, Joanne, until our next catch up, I'll say wow.
Yes, see you soon.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Progress in Practice. A big thank you to Joanne for her time and for being so candid about the Better Cone journey. I really loved her openness and honesty around the inspiration behind the project, the hard work of figuring out without a playbook to follow, and what they've learned along the way. I think it's really impressive that just within just a few months, they have already diverted over 1,500 cones from landfill. Pretty impressive start. Yes, there's hundreds of thousands of more cones to collect and recycle, but this is a good start. It's pretty positive, and no doubt there's more road, bumps in the road, no pun intended, and obstacles ahead. But I think they've done a pretty awesome job to get it to this point. And what I really like about it is, while so many people whinge and complain about the unglamorous road cone, RTL stopped. They shut up and did something about it. And now they have created a really unique selling point for themselves and to their customers and to their industry that is having a genuine impact on environmental impacts and their clients' sustainability goals. So it really shows you the positive outcomes that can come when you look at these problems and commit to solving them. If today's conversation sparked something for you, I'd encourage you to find out more about the Better Cone at RTL's website. You see the links below. And if you would like to know more about the work that Go Well do, or the themes that we are exploring in this series, then please reach out to us. Also, should be able to find our website below. We'll be back again with another episode of Progress in Practice soon. Until then, go well. Mā te wā.